The Cold War was a war of shadows, a war where the most dangerous weapons were the ones you never saw. And in the frozen darkness beneath the Arctic ice, the Soviet Union built something that would haunt NATO's nightmares for decades: the Typhoon-class submarine, the largest submarine ever constructed. A nuclear leviathan designed not just to fight a war, but to survive one. To NATO commanders, it wasn't just a vessel, it was a phantom. A fortress that could vanish beneath the ice and emerge anywhere, anytime, carrying enough firepower to devastate an entire continent. This is the story of why the Typhoon terrified the West, why its very existence changed the rules of nuclear deterrence, and why even today it remains one of the most formidable machines ever created. The year is 1976. Deep inside Soviet naval headquarters, engineers are finalizing plans for a submarine unlike anything the world has ever seen. Not just bigger, not just more powerful, but fundamentally different in design and purpose. The project is codenamed Akula, meaning shark in Russian, but NATO will give it another name, Typhoon, and that name will become synonymous with fear. The Soviets already have ballistic missile submarines, but they have a problem. American attack submarines are getting better at hunting them. Sonar technology is improving. Satellite surveillance is expanding. The oceans are becoming more transparent. So the Soviets ask a different question. What if we don't try to hide in the open ocean? What if we build a submarine that can disappear somewhere no one can follow? The Arctic, a frozen wasteland where sonar doesn't work properly, where ice blocks satellite surveillance, where Western navies rarely venture, and where a submarine could hide for months, waiting, listening, ready to strike if the order ever comes. But operating under the Arctic ice requires a completely new kind of submarine. It needs to be strong enough to surface through thick ice, large enough to carry enough supplies for extended patrols, quiet enough to avoid detection, and survivable enough to fulfill its mission even after a nuclear first strike. The Typhoon is designed to meet all of these requirements, and more. Construction begins at the Severodvinsk shipyard in 1976. What emerges over the next few years is a monster. The Typhoon measures 175 meters long, nearly 24 meters wide. It displaces 48,000 tons when submerged. To put that in perspective, it's larger than most World War II battleships, larger than many modern destroyers. It's not just a submarine, it's an underwater capital ship. But size alone doesn't explain why NATO feared it. The real terror lies in its design. Most submarines have a single pressure hull, one cylindrical tube where the crew lives and works. The Typhoon has two. Two complete pressure hulls side by side, connected by passages and surrounded by an outer hydrodynamic shell. This double-hull configuration is revolutionary. If one hull is damaged, the submarine can survive on the other. Torpedoes that would sink a conventional submarine might only cripple a Typhoon. It's built like a tank. Redundant systems, multiple compartments, designed to take punishment and keep fighting. But the double-hull design serves another purpose: space. Enormous amounts of space. Space for supplies, space for crew comfort, space for equipment, and most importantly, space for 20 massive missile tubes, the R-39 missile, NATO designation SS-20. Each Typhoon carries 20 of them. Each missile is 16 meters tall, weighs 90 tons, and carries 10 independently targetable nuclear warheads. Do the math: 20 missiles, 10 warheads each. 200 nuclear warheads on a single submarine. Each warhead can be programmed to hit a different target. Different cities, different military bases, different command centers. One Typhoon hiding beneath the ice has the firepower to obliterate dozens of targets across an entire continent. And here's what made NATO strategists lose sleep. The Typhoon doesn't need to leave the Arctic to launch its missiles. The R-39 has a range of 8,300 kilometers. That's over 5,000 miles. A Typhoon sitting under the ice near the North Pole can hit targets anywhere in the United States, anywhere in Europe. It doesn't need to transit through choke points where Western attack submarines wait. It doesn't need to expose itself in the open ocean. It just needs to break through the ice and fire. And the R-39 is designed to do exactly that. Solid fuel propulsion. Cold launch system. The missile is ejected from the tube by compressed gas, then ignites once clear of the water. It can launch through several meters of ice. The submarine doesn't even need to find an open polanya. It can create its own launch position, but missiles are only useful if you can get them to the target. And that requires staying hidden, staying alive. The Typhoon excels at both. Stealth is built into every aspect of its design. The hull is coated with anechoic tiles, special rubber compounds that absorb sonar pings rather than reflecting them. The reactor is mounted on shock absorbers to reduce vibration and noise. The propellers are carefully designed to minimize cavitation. Every piece of machinery that could create sound is isolated, dampened, silenced. But the Typhoon's greatest stealth advantage isn't technological, it's geographical. The Arctic Ocean is a sonar nightmare. Sound travels differently in cold water. Ice flows create constant background noise. Pressure ridges and ice keels scatter sonar beams. Temperature layers bend sound waves unpredictably. For Western attack submarines and surface ships, trying to find a typhoon under the Arctic ice is like trying to find a ghost in a haunted house. Every sound could be ice. Every echo could be a false return. And the Typhoon knows these waters. Soviet submariners train extensively in Arctic operations. They know where the ice is thickest, where the water is deepest, where the thermal layers provide the best concealment. They can sit on the bottom in shallow areas where NATO submarines fear to go. They can hide under pressure ridges that look like underwater mountains on sonar. They can wait, patient, silent, invisible. NATO knows the Typhoons are out there. Intelligence reports confirm their construction. Satellite photos show them in port. But once they slip beneath the ice, they vanish. Western navies try everything to track them. Attack submarines patrol the edges of the Arctic. Sonar arrays are planted on the ocean floor. Aircraft drop sonobuoys. Satellites watch for breaks in the ice that might indicate a submarine surfacing. But the Arctic is vast, and the Typhoons are patient. They can stay submerged for 4 months. Their nuclear reactors never need refueling during a patrol. They carry enough food and supplies for extended operations. The crew of 160 men live in relative comfort compared to other submarines. The double-hull design allows for amenities unheard of on Western boats. A swimming pool, a sauna, a gym, recreation areas. These aren't luxuries, they're necessities. When you're asking men to spend months under the ice, possibly waiting for orders to launch a nuclear strike that will end civilization, you need to keep them sane. You need to keep them ready. The Typhoon is designed as much for crew endurance as for combat capability. And that endurance creates a strategic nightmare for NATO. During the Cold War, nuclear strategy revolves around something called the triad. Land-based missiles, strategic bombers, ballistic missile submarines. Each leg of the triad has strengths and weaknesses. Land-based missiles are accurate and powerful, but their locations are known. They're vulnerable to a first strike. Bombers are flexible and can be recalled, but they're slow and can be shot down. Submarines are the ace in the hole. They're mobile, hidden, survivable. Even if an enemy launches a surprise attack and destroys your missiles and bombers, your submarines are still out there, still capable of retaliation. This is called second strike capability, the ability to absorb a nuclear first strike and still hit back. It's the foundation of deterrence. If your enemy knows they can't destroy all your weapons in a first strike, they won't risk starting a war. But second strike capability only works if your submarines can actually survive and launch. And that's where most ballistic missile submarines have a problem. They operate in the open ocean. They need to patrol areas within range of their targets. American submarines in the Atlantic and Pacific. Soviet submarines in the same waters. And in those waters, they're vulnerable. Attack submarines hunt them. Aircraft search for them. If war breaks out, the enemy's first priority is to sink them before they can launch. The Typhoon changes this equation. By operating under the Arctic ice, the Typhoon becomes nearly invulnerable. NATO attack submarines can't effectively hunt them there. Surface ships can't reach them. Aircraft can't detect them through the ice. Even if the Soviet Union is hit by a massive nuclear first strike, even if every land-based missile is destroyed, even if every bomber is caught on the ground, the Typhoons are still there, waiting beneath the ice, ready to launch. This makes them the ultimate deterrent. The ultimate guarantee of retaliation, and NATO knows it. American war planners run simulation after simulation. How do you stop a Typhoon? How do you find it under the ice? How do you kill it before it launches? The answers are not encouraging. You can't reliably track it. You can't predict where it will be. You can't strike it preemptively. The only option is to try to destroy it after it surfaces to launch. But by then, it's too late. The missiles are already flying. So NATO adapts its strategy. If you can't stop the Typhoons, you have to make sure they never get the order to launch. You have to prevent war in the first place. You have to make deterrence work. The existence of the Typhoon actually stabilizes the Cold War in a perverse way. Both sides know that nuclear war is unwinnable. Both sides know that even a successful first strike won't prevent devastating retaliation. The Typhoon makes that certainty absolute. But there's another dimension to the Typhoon's impact. Psychological. The Soviet Union only builds 6 Typhoons. 6. Compared to dozens of other ballistic missile submarines. Why so few? Because they don't need more. 6 Typhoons represent 1,200 nuclear warheads, more than enough to devastate any adversary, and the psychological impact of these 6 boats far exceeds their numbers. NATO naval officers know that somewhere under the Arctic ice, invisible and untouchable, there are typhoons. They don't know exactly where. They don't know how many are on patrol at any given time. They just know they're out there, waiting. This uncertainty is a weapon in itself. It forces NATO to maintain expensive anti-submarine forces. It requires constant vigilance. It creates paranoia. Every unusual sonar contact in northern waters could be a typhoon. Every ice movement could be a submarine surfacing. The psychological burden of facing an enemy you can't see, can't track, and can't kill is immense. It affects planning. It affects morale. It affects strategic calculations at the highest levels. The first Typhoon Dmitry Donsk enters service in 1981. Over the next 8 years, 5 more follow. They patrol the Arctic throughout the 1980s, silent sentinels of nuclear deterrence. NATO develops new technologies to counter them. Better sonar, under-ice-capable submarines, new detection methods, but the fundamental problem remains. The Arctic is too big, too hostile, too perfect for hiding. The typhoons maintain their invulnerability, then the Cold War ends. The Soviet Union collapses. The nuclear standoff that defined decades suddenly evaporates. And the typhoons, these instruments of apocalypse, become relics of a terrifying era. Maintaining them is expensive. Russia's economy is in shambles. One by one, they're decommissioned. By the early 2000s, only one remains in service. The Dmitry Donsk, converted to a test platform for new missile systems. The others are dismantled, their reactors defueled, their hulls cut apart. The threat they represented fades into history, but the legacy of the Typhoon endures. It proved that a submarine could be truly invulnerable, that the Arctic could be militarized in ways previously unimaginable. That size and survivability could trump speed and stealth in certain scenarios. Modern Russian submarines are smaller, more efficient, but they still patrol the Arctic. They still carry ballistic missiles. They still operate in waters where Western navies struggle to follow. The lessons of the Typhoon live on, and as climate change opens new Arctic sea routes, as nations compete for resources in the far north, the strategic importance of these frozen waters only increases. The Typhoon may be gone, but the game it pioneered continues. The Arctic remains a realm of shadows, a place where submarines can hide, where deterrence is maintained by invisible threats, where the rules of naval warfare are different. The Typhoon-class submarine terrified NATO because it represented something unprecedented, a weapon that couldn't be countered, a threat that couldn't be eliminated, a guarantee that nuclear war would be mutual suicide. In the twisted logic of Cold War strategy, that made it a force for peace, a monster that prevented the very apocalypse it was designed to unleash. And perhaps that's the most haunting legacy of all. The largest submarine ever built, the most powerful, the most feared, was ultimately a weapon that succeeded by never firing a shot.